A golden chariot rumbles through ancient streets, a victorious general standing tall as the city roars. This was the Roman triumph, but it was never just a parade. It was a masterful blend of raw power, sacred ritual, and political theater that held the entire Roman world together. By the end of this, you will understand the hidden rules and shocking secrets behind one of history's most spectacular ceremonies. We will uncover why a triumphant general was painted red like a god, and what a whispering slave in his chariot was there to prevent, what his true power looked like when it puts on a show. A triumph was not a simple victory parade. It was the highest honor a Roman general could ever receive, a grand public ceremony sanctioned by the gods and officially granted by the Roman Senate. But this honor was not automatic. A general could not simply march home and demand his celebration. He had to earn it under a set of incredibly strict rules. His victory had to be total against a foreign enemy and result in the expansion of Roman territory. He also had to hold a specific high-ranking magistracy and bring his army home, a move designed to ensure his soldiers were demobilized and no longer a personal threat to the state. At its heart, the ceremony was a powerful, multi-sensory procession designed to overwhelm every citizen. It featured the triumphant general himself, now called the triumphator, his loyal army singing songs both proud and rude, and a long train of captured spoils and prisoners. But this was not just a march. It was a sacred journey through the very heart of the city, a deliberate path from the outer fields to the temples on the Capitoline Hill. The air would be thick with the smell of incense, the sounds of trumpets and cheering crowds, and the breathtaking sight of captured gold and treasures. This spectacle was meticulously crafted to burn the glory and absolute power of Rome into the memory of every single person who witnessed it. To even be considered for this supreme honor, a Roman general had to navigate a labyrinth of ancient and unyielding rules. First and foremost, he had to hold the power of imperium, the supreme executive authority to command an army. This is not a power given to every soldier, but a formal right bestowed only on the highest magistrates and provincial governors. Next, the war itself had to be just, officially declared by the Roman state against a foreign enemy, not in a civil war against fellow Romans. The victory had to be absolute and overwhelmingly bloody. Ancient sources tell us the general had to have slain at least 5,000 of the enemy in a single battle. A staggering number meant to prove the conflict was a true test of arms and not a minor skirmish. His campaign also had to significantly expand the territory of Rome, pushing the frontiers outward and bringing the entire war to a definitive and final close, allowing the legions to return home. Yet, for all their apparent rigidity, these rules were constantly bent and broken. Ambitious politicians and powerful generals found endless ways to reinterpret the criteria. A questionable conflict might be retroactively declared just. The body count from several smaller engagements could be creatively tallied to meet the 5,000 threshold. Why did the Senate so often look the other way? The answer lies in the raw politics of the era. Granting a triumph was a powerful tool for building alliances, rewarding loyalty, and placating a popular and victorious general who might otherwise become a threat to the state itself. This inherent contradiction, a ceremony bound by sacred law yet twisted by human ambition, lies at the very heart of the triumph's enduring mystery. The day of the triumph began at dawn, with the entire city holding its breath. The general, now the triumphator, would meet his army on the Campus Martius, the field of Mars that lay outside the city's sacred boundary. Here, beyond the ancient wall, his soldiers were still legally an army under his command. The air was thick with anticipation, the clanking of armor, and the scent of incense as the triumphator donned his ceremonial regalia. He was no longer merely a man. He was clothed in a solid purple toga, embroidered with golden stars, and his face was painted a brilliant, shocking red with the sacred mineral cinnabar. In his right hand, he held an ivory scepter topped with a golden eagle, and in his left a laurel branch, the symbol of victory. He looked less like a mortal commander and more like the god Jupiter himself, a walking, breathing symbol of Rome's divine favor. The procession began its slow, majestic march toward the Porta Triumphalis, the triumphal gate. This specific gate was sealed shut at all other times, opened only for this singular, sacred purpose. To pass through it was to cross a magical and legal threshold, transforming the general and his army from a military force into a sacred spectacle. The order of the march was a meticulously choreographed narrative of conquest. At the very front walked the senators and magistrates of Rome, the state's civilian leaders, asserting their authority over the military victory. They were followed by a seemingly endless river of spoils. Carts groaned under the weight of captured armor, weapons, and furniture. Tables were piled high with gold and silver coins, jewels, and intricate works of art, all taken from the fallen enemy. These tangible treasures were living proof of the wealth and power that this general had won for Rome. Next came the human cost of the war. The most important captured enemy leaders and their families were paraded in chains, forced to walk in humiliation before the roaring crowd. They were often dressed in their finest native regalia, a cruel display meant to highlight the grandeur of the enemy that Rome had so thoroughly defeated. Following them were the pure white oxen, their horns gilded with gold, destined for sacrifice on the Capitoline Hill. Their calm, plodding steps offered a stark, silent contrast to the anguish of the prisoners and the cheers of the mob. Then, the moment everyone had waited for arrived. The triumphator himself stood tall in his golden, four-horse chariot. A public slave stood behind him, holding a golden wreath over his head while whispering a powerful, haunting reminder into his ear. "Remember, you are only a man. This glory will not last." Finally, marching behind their commander with the familiar, easy swagger, came his own legionaries. These were the men who had won the victory with their blood and sweat, and in a tradition as old as the ceremony itself, they did not sing his formal praises. Instead, they filled the air with loud, humorous, and often deeply insulting songs about their general. They might mock his vanity, his ambition, or even a personal scandal. This was not simple disrespect. It was a crucial, ancient ritual to protect him. By publicly humbling the triumphator through laughter and mockery, they sought to ward off the evil eye of jealousy from the gods, who might otherwise strike down a man growing too proud, a man who looked too much like a god on his day of ultimate glory. Standing in that chariot, the triumphator was a living paradox. He was draped not in the simple white of a citizen, but in a toga picta, a solid purple garment shimmering with intricate gold embroidery. A laurel wreath, the ancient symbol of victory, crowned his head, while in his hand he clutched an ivory scepter, the ultimate emblem of command. But the most startling transformation was on his face, painted a brilliant, sacred red with vermilion. This was not mere pageantry. Every element of his appearance was a deliberate, conscious echo of the great statue of Jupiter Optimus Maximus that stood waiting for him atop the Capitoline Hill. For this single day, the mortal general was not just honoring the god, he was visually becoming the god. He embodied Jupiter's power, his authority, and his divine right to rule. The psychological impact of this was staggering. Can you fathom the sheer intoxication of that moment? After years of brutal warfare in some distant province, this man was now processing through the heart of his world, hailed as a living deity by hundreds of thousands of his fellow citizens. The cheers washing over him were not just for a successful commander, they were the adoration reserved for a divine savior. This was the ultimate reward, a psychic high that no amount of treasure could ever equal. Yet this precise elevation was also the ceremony's most dangerous element. The Roman state, deeply suspicious of any individual who might aspire to be king, was intentionally flirting with that very idea. By allowing a man to taste godhood, they were simultaneously satisfying his colossal ambition and demonstrating where the true, ultimate power lay. The state could grant this divinity, and the state could just as easily take it away. The entire spectacle was a breathtakingly risky balance, a public display designed to crown a hero without creating a tyrant. But the true weight of victory was measured in the endless river of spoils that flowed through the streets. Picture the carts, not just a few, but a seemingly unbroken train, each one groaning under the weight of plunder. They carried the raw wealth of nations, mountains of gold and silver coin minted with the faces of foreign kings, now rendered worthless. There were stacks of ornate weapons and shields, their intricate designs a testament to the craftsmanship of the conquered. Gleaming statues of alien gods, precious gems, fine silks, and furniture of exotic woods all passed before the eyes of the Roman crowd, a mobile museum of conquest. This was more than just loot, it was a calculated inventory of power. To make the distant war tangible, the procession included massive paintings on wooden panels and detailed scale models of the enemy's fortified cities, depicting their dramatic sieges and ultimate falls. For the average citizen who had never left Italy, these images transformed abstract news of a foreign war into a vivid, visceral story of Roman triumph. The message was undeniable. Every gold coin, every captured statue, was a direct and tangible benefit of expansion. This spectacle justified the taxes and the sons sent off to fight, proving that Roman military might pay for itself in the most dazzling way imaginable. It was a masterclass in propaganda, turning the fruits of violence into a public celebration of prosperity. Yet amidst the glittering spoils and the roaring crowds, the most chilling spectacle was the procession of the prisoners. These were not common soldiers, but kings, chieftains, and generals, men who had once commanded armies and ruled nations. They had been kept alive, spared on the battlefield for this single, humiliating purpose. Stripped of their real power, they were often dressed in the full, ornate regalia of their former office, their chains clinking loudly against fine silks and golden ornaments. This cruel irony was intentional. It showed the Roman people the complete and total subjugation of a proud enemy, transforming a living, breathing leader into a mere prop in the story of Roman victory. The crowd's cheers were not just for their general, but also a form of ridicule directed at these broken figures, a public affirmation that any who opposed Rome would be brought to this lowly state. The procession's end for these captives was as predictable as it was grim. After being paraded through the entire city, the most prominent prisoners were not returned to a cell. They were led down a short, dark staircase into a small, dank underground chamber known as the Tullianum. This is not a prison for holding criminals, but a place of final, ritual execution. There, stripped of their ceremonial garb, they were often strangled or beheaded. This act was the brutal, non-negotiable period at the end of the triumph's glorious sentence. It served as the ultimate demonstration of Roman supremacy, a stark message to every foreign ambassador and every potential rival. Resistance was not just defeated, it was extinguished, its leaders erased in the most definitive way imaginable. The roar of the crowd above would fade away, replaced by a profound silence, a chilling reminder that the price of defiance was everything. This sacred path through the city was far from a random victory lap. It was a meticulously planned pilgrimage through the spiritual and political heart of Rome, a journey designed to be witnessed by gods and citizens alike. The procession would leave the Field of Mars and cross into the city proper over a special bridge, the Pons Sublicius, entering the bustling Forum Boarium, the city's ancient cattle market. This area was sacred to the demigod Hercules, a hero known for his mighty labors, subtly linking the general's own Herculean efforts to the legendary past. From there, the parade would turn and flow into the vast, open space of the Circus Maximus. This was the city's premier venue for public games, a space that could hold hundreds of thousands of people. Here, the scale of the spectacle became truly overwhelming, the cheers of the immense crowd echoing off the surrounding hills, magnifying the glory of the triumphator for all to see. Exiting the circus, the procession began its most symbolic leg, turning onto the Via Sacra, the sacred way. This was the most famous street in the world, the main artery of the Roman Forum. Now, the general was moving through the very center of Roman public life. On his left and right stood the basilicas, the halls of commerce and law. He passed the rostra, the speaker's platform from which politicians shaped the destiny of the republic. He saw the Temple of Vesta, where the sacred flame of Rome eternally burned. Every step was a deliberate reinforcement of his victory's meaning. This was not a personal achievement. It was a victory for Roman commerce, for Roman law, for the entire Roman way of life protected by its gods. The entire route was a living map of civic duty and divine favor, physically connecting the general's military success to the institutions that define Rome itself. The final, most grueling challenge was the climb up the steep slope of the Capitoline Hill. With the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus looming above, the triumphator would dismount from his golden chariot. On foot, he would ascend the long staircase, a final act of humility and effort before the king of the gods. At the summit, in the temple's inner chamber, he would offer the ultimate sacrifice of the white oxen, laying the laurels of his victory at the feet of Jupiter's statue. In this breathtaking climax, the journey was complete. The general had been transformed from a commander in the field to a godlike figure in the streets, and finally, to a supplicant in the house of the divine, his personal glory forever bound to the eternal state. The final, most grueling challenge of the day now began, the slow, deliberate climb up the Capitoline Hill. This is not merely a parade route ending on a high point. The Capitoline was the spiritual fortress of Rome, the home of its most sacred temples, and the very spot where, according to legend, the city's founders, Romulus and Remus, had received their divine signs. To ascend this hill was to approach the dwelling place of the gods themselves. The triumphator would dismount from his magnificent chariot, leaving behind the roaring adulation of the crowds. On foot, he would begin the arduous climb up the long, steep staircase, each step a physical act of humility and effort after hours of God-like veneration. This was a powerful, symbolic transition, moving from the realm of men into the domain of the divine. The air would be thick with the smell of burning incense and the palpable sense of sacred expectation. At the summit, the procession would halt before the grand, pillared facade of the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the largest and most important temple in the entire Roman world. Here, in the shadow of the god he had impersonated all day, the general performed the rituals that would complete his transformation. He would remove the laurel wreath from his own head and place it upon the knees of the massive cult statue of Jupiter inside the temple's inner chamber. This was the ultimate gesture of returning the victory to its true, divine author. Then came the climax of the entire sacred journey, the sacrifice of the pure white oxen. Their throats were slit in a precise, ritual act, their blood offered to the king of the gods. A portion of the immense spoils, the captured gold and treasure that had so dazzled the crowds, was formally dedicated to the temple's treasury. In this final, breathtaking sequence of actions, the entire meaning of the triumph was fulfilled. The raw, bloody reality of a military campaign in a distant land was purified and transformed into a permanent religious offering. The general's personal glory was subsumed into the eternal needs of the state. He had thanked the gods for their past favor, and more importantly, he was seeking their continued blessing for Rome's future conquest. The ceremony that began with a man painted like a god ended with that same man as a humble supplicant, his ambition safely channeled back into the service of the Republic. But behind the painted general and his glittering spoils marched the true architects of his glory, his army. These hardened legionaries, who had won the victory with their sweat and blood, now played a complex and carefully regulated role. They marched in the triumph, celebrated as heroes, yet they were required to leave their weapons and armor outside the city's sacred boundary. Disarmed, they were no longer a conquering force, but a demobilized crowd, a crucial distinction for a state perpetually wary of its own military might. This single rule transformed them from a potential threat to public order into a key part of the spectacle. Their very presence a public demonstration that the campaign was over and the soldiers were returning to civilian life. Their celebration, however, came with a sharp and ancient edge. As they followed their general's chariot, they did not chant as formal praises. Instead, they filled the air with loud, humorous, and deeply insulting songs directed squarely at the man they had just fought for. They might mock his vanity, his ambition, a rumored personal scandal, or even his military missteps. To an outside observer, this would seem like sheer insubordination, a bizarre breach of discipline on the most important day of their commander's life. But this was not disrespect. It was a deliberate, ritualized act of mockery with a profound purpose. By publicly humbling the triumphator through laughter and satire, the soldiers were performing a crucial social function. They were protecting him from invidia, the dangerous evil eye of divine envy. The Romans believed that the gods would grow jealous of any mortal who experienced too much good fortune and pride. By verbally tearing their general down, the soldiers were, in a strange way, shielding him. They were reminding everyone, including the gods, that despite the red paint and the golden chariot, he was still just a man. This carnivalesque tradition showcased the incredibly complex relationship between a Roman general and his troops. They were bound by loyalty and shared hardship, yet separated by immense social class and ambition. In this one ritual, the soldiers could simultaneously honor their commander as a hero and cut him down to size, ensuring that for one fleeting day, the balance of power between them was perfectly and safely restored. That roar of the crowd was not just spontaneous joy, it was a carefully cultivated political tool. The Roman triumph was the ultimate piece of propaganda, a masterful blend of what would later be called bread and circuses on a truly epic scale. For the common citizen, the plebs, this was more than a free show. It was a powerful, multi-sensory lesson in the benefits of loyalty. Every cartload of captured gold was a promise of future public works, of new buildings and potential cash handouts funded by this very plunder. The display of defeated enemies was a stark reminder of the security that Roman military might provided, a guarantee that the state could protect its people from any external threat. The entire ceremony reinforced a clear social contract. The senatorial elite, through the figure of the triumphator, demonstrated their ability to deliver victory, wealth, and security. In return, the populace offered their political support and their allegiance, solidifying the power of the ruling class. The spectacle was a vivid, living argument for the status quo. It showed every citizen, from the poorest laborer to the wealthiest merchant, exactly what was at stake. To be Roman was to share in this glory, to benefit from this endless expansion. To oppose Rome was to end up in chains, paraded in humiliation before being led to a dark cell. The message was brutally simple: cooperation brought wealth and celebration, while defiance meant utter annihilation. This was public relations engineered on a monumental level, designed to bind the hearts and minds of the people to the state through a combination of awe, gratitude, and fear. This thunderous spectacle was, at its core, a profound act of faith. Every element of the Roman triumph was a sacred rite, a sacrum, designed to maintain the most critical relationship in the ancient world, the Pax Deorum, or the peace of the gods. The Romans believed their state existed in a fragile covenant with a vast pantheon of deities. A major military victory was not just a human achievement, it was the ultimate sign that the gods were pleased, that the rituals had been performed correctly, and that the sacred contract was intact. The triumph was the city's collective and overwhelming thank you note to Jupiter Optimus Maximus and the other gods for their decisive favor. But it served another, darker purpose, one of spiritual cleansing. War, even a just war, involved the massive shedding of blood, an act that polluted the army and the entire state with a kind of religious guilt. The long, winding procession through the city, the burning incense, the chanting priests, and the final sacrifice on the Capitoline were all part of an elaborate purification ritual. This ceremony washed away the blood guilt, or pieculum, accumulated on the battlefield. It transformed the general and his soldiers from men stained by violence back into pious citizens worthy of their city. Can you sense the deeper need being fulfilled here? This was not merely about celebrating a win, it was about ensuring the next one. By restoring the sacred balance, the Romans believed they were securing the continued support of the gods for all future endeavors. The entire breathtaking pageant, from the first blast of the trumpet to the final offering of the oxen, was a meticulous performance aimed at an audience of deities, a desperate and glorious plea to keep the divine machinery of the universe turning in Rome's favor. And so the general stood there, bathed in the adoration of the crowd, his face painted the color of Jupiter himself. Yet right behind him, in that golden chariot, stood a figure who represented the ultimate contradiction. A public slave, holding a golden crown over the triumphator's head, would spend the entire procession leaning forward, whispering a powerful, haunting refrain directly into his ear. Look behind you, remember you are a man. This was not a quiet suggestion, it was a mandated, state-sanctioned ritual, a verbal anchor thrown against the overwhelming tide of glory. In that single, repeated phrase, the entire Roman anxiety about power was captured. The state had just spent the entire day elevating this man to the brink of divinity, dressing him as a god and parading him before the city. Yet in the same breath, through the voice of its lowest citizen, it was desperately trying to pull him back down to earth. Why go to such lengths? The Romans understood the corrupting nature of absolute power better than most. They had expelled their own kings centuries before and built a republic founded on the principle that no single man should rule forever. The triumph was a necessary but incredibly dangerous exception to this rule. For one day, a single individual held the city in his hand, his ego inflated by the cheers of hundreds of thousands. The whispering slave was the republic's immune response, a psychological safeguard against the virus of tyranny. His words were a constant, jarring reminder of mortality, a deliberate check on the hubris that could tempt a victorious general to forget his place and seek permanent power. Think of the sheer willpower it must have taken for that general to absorb those words. With every step of the chariot, he was being told he was a god by the masses and a mortal by the slave. This ritualized humility was designed to keep him balanced on that knife's edge, allowing the state to harness his military genius without being consumed by his ambition. The slave's whisper was the small, still voice of the republic itself, ensuring that the man who could have anything was reminded he could not have everything. Pompey the Great's third triumph in the year 61 BC was a spectacle so immense it seemed to rewrite the very definition of the ceremony. For 2 full days, a river of wealth and wonder flowed through Rome's streets, all celebrating his campaigns against King Mithridates and the reorganization of the entire Eastern Mediterranean. The spoils were almost beyond comprehension. There were enough captured gold and silver to lower Rome's interest rates for years. He displayed a solid pearl throne, an object of such exotic luxury it stunned the populace. But the most audacious item was a portrait of Pompey himself, crafted not from paint or marble, but entirely from pearls. This was a profound shift in the triumph's message. The procession had always showcased the wealth of conquered nations for the glory of Rome, but a portrait made of precious gems celebrated something else entirely, the personal brand of the conqueror. The line between state and individual was becoming dangerously blurred. Pompey's triumph was not merely a celebration, it was a political earthquake. He had effectively claimed credit for bringing the entire East under Roman control, and the sheer scale of his personal glory threatened to eclipse the Senate itself. The traditional whispers of the slave in his chariot, reminding him he was only a man, must have rung hollow against the sight of his own pearl-encrusted image. This was no longer just a general honoring Jupiter. It was a man presenting himself as the architect of a new Roman world, a precedent that would haunt the Republic for decades to come. Julius Caesar's quadruple triumph of 46 BC was a spectacle of such overwhelming scale and audacity that it redefined the very nature of the ceremony. For 4 consecutive days, the city of Rome was submerged in a tidal wave of pageantry, each day dedicated to a different region he had conquered: Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa. This was not merely a celebration of victory, it was a masterclass in political storytelling designed to cement Caesar not just as a great general, but as the undisputed master of the Roman world. The first day, celebrating his long campaign in Gaul, presented a narrative of the wild, barbaric north finally tamed by Roman order, and at the heart of this story was a single, powerful image: the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix. For 6 years, this brilliant leader had united the tribes of Gaul and humiliated Roman legions. Now he was paraded in chains through the very city he had once dared to defy, a living trophy of Caesar's relentless will. After being displayed as the ultimate symbol of conquered resistance, Vercingetorix was led to the dark chamber of the Tullianum and executed. This is not just the removal of a rival, it was the deliberate and public closing of a chapter, a message that any challenge to Caesar's authority, no matter how noble, would end in absolute obliteration. But Caesar's genius and his arrogance shone even brighter on the second day, dedicated to his Egyptian campaign. The crowd expected to see spoils from his legendary affair with Queen Cleopatra. Instead, they witnessed a different, more shocking prisoner, her younger sister, Arsinoe IV. she had contested Cleopatra's throne and briefly driven Caesar into a desperate defense within Alexandria. By parading a royal Egyptian princess in chains, Caesar was accomplishing several things at once. He was demonstrating his power over a decadent Eastern kingdom, legitimizing his ally Cleopatra, and personally humiliating a woman who had dared to oppose him. Yet for the traditional Roman elite, this was a step too far. It was one thing to crush barbarian chieftains, quite another to drag a royal woman from a civilized kingdom through the dirt for what many saw as a personal vendetta intertwined with a scandalous love affair. The quadruple triumph was Caesar's ultimate piece of public relations, a dazzling display meant to drown out all criticism in a sea of glory and gold. But in the shadows, the whispers grew louder. Each calculated humiliation, each audacious display of personal power, was meticulously noted by senators who saw not a savior of the republic, but a man who acted like a king. The same triumphs that built his legend also forged the daggers of his assassins, proving that even the greatest victory parade could not triumph over the deep-seated fears of the Roman heart. The sheer scale of a triumph carried an equally staggering price tag. While the mountains of captured spoils provided the primary funding, the financial burden did not end there. The victorious general was fully expected to dip deeply into his own personal fortune, to elevate the spectacle from a simple procession into an unforgettable civic festival. This was not an optional act of generosity, but a critical political investment. He would finance temporary wooden theaters and stadiums to host the accompanying games, or ludi, which featured everything from chariot races and athletic contests to elaborate gladiatorial combats and staged animal hunts. Beyond the entertainment, he was also expected to provide direct cash handouts, known as congyria, to the citizens of Rome, and most importantly, a massive bonus to the soldiers who had fought for him. This system created a powerful and self-perpetuating cycle of wealth and influence. A general who won a major victory would acquire immense plunder, which he would then reinvest in a triumph that boosted his public popularity and secured the loyalty of his troop. This process transformed him from a military leader into a political powerhouse with a dedicated following that answered directly to him, not to the Senate. The very ceremony, designed to showcase the strength of the Roman state, was in effect financing the rise of individuals who could one day threaten to tear it apart. A triumph was not just a reward for past success, it was the down payment on a future political machine. The thunderous applause of a triumph might fade after a day, but the general's legacy was carved into the city's very stone. A significant portion of the mountains of captured wealth was not squandered on fleeting pleasures, but was instead invested in permanent public monuments, transforming the spoils of war into the building blocks of Roman civilization. This practice created an architecture of victory, a physical landscape that constantly reminded every citizen of where their wealth and security originated. When a Roman walked through the Forum, they were not just passing by buildings, they were walking through a museum of conquest, each structure telling a story of a defeated enemy and the general who had brought their riches home. The most spectacular example was Pompey's theater, a marvel funded entirely by his eastern campaigns. Before this, Rome had only temporary wooden theaters built for specific festivals. Pompey used his immense spoils to construct the city's first permanent stone theater, a massive complex that could seat thousands and included a grand portico with gardens and art galleries. It was not merely a place for entertainment, it was a bold political statement in marble and stone, a permanent claim on the city's cultural life, ensuring that his name would be spoken by generations of theater-goers. Similarly, the Basilica Aemilia, one of the main legal and business centers in the Forum, was repeatedly rebuilt and embellished with spoils from various triumphs. Its polished marble floors and ornate columns, paid for by conquered nations, were a daily reminder that Roman law and commerce were underpinned by military might. These buildings served a dual purpose. They provided practical benefits to the populace, fostering goodwill, while simultaneously etching the general's personal achievement into the immutable fabric of the city. Long after the triumphator's red paint had washed away, his name lived on in the stones he had donated. a silent but powerful form of immortality that shaped the Roman skyline for centuries. This centralization of glory was a quiet revolution, one that unfolded not on the battlefield but in the political theater of the city. The old Republican triumph, for all its grandeur, was a deeply competitive affair. Ambitious senators vied for this ultimate prize, using it as a stepping stone to greater influence within a system that distributed power among many. The spectacle itself was a public display of that very competition, a temporary and sanctioned explosion of individual prestige that ultimately reinforced the collective authority of the Senate. But as the Republic crumbled under the weight of its own expansion and the colossal ambitions of men like Pompey and Caesar, the very nature of this ceremony had to change. The first emperor, Augustus, understood this better than anyone. He had seen how a triumph could fuel a rival's power base and threaten the state itself. His solution was as brilliant as it was absolute. He systematically transformed the triumph from a senator's reward into an imperial monopoly, a privilege now reserved almost exclusively for the emperor and his immediate family. Why would he dismantle a tradition so central to Roman identity? The answer lies in the simple, brutal logic of autocracy. By claiming a near-total monopoly on military glory, Augustus ensured that no other general could ever use the triumph as a platform to challenge his supreme authority. The glorious chaos of republican competition was replaced by the orderly, predictable pageantry of dynastic power. A triumph was no longer about a senator's personal achievement. It was a state-sponsored advertisement for the imperial house, a carefully choreographed narrative demonstrating that victory flowed solely from the emperor's divine favor and leadership. This shift fundamentally altered the ceremony's message. Instead of showcasing the competitive vitality of the Senate, it now reinforced the singular, unchallengeable position of the emperor as the sole source of Rome's safety and prosperity. The sprawling, unpredictable republic was gone, and in its place stood an empire where only one family was permitted to wear the red paint of Jupiter. The red paint of Jupiter and the smoke of pagan sacrifice could not survive the coming of a new god. The triumph, that ancient pillar of Roman state religion, faced an existential crisis as Christianity ascended from persecuted sect to official faith. Its final chapters were not a sudden abolition, but a slow, profound transformation, mirroring the empire's own turbulent evolution. One of the last great traditional triumphs was celebrated by Emperor Constantine I in the year 312, following his decisive victory at the Milvian Bridge. According to legend, Constantine had seen a vision of the Christian cross in the sky before the battle, a sign that he attributed his victory to the God of the Christians. Yet when he entered Rome in triumph, the ceremony he performed was steeped in the old ways. He would have processed along the sacred way, displaying the spoils of his defeated rival, Maxentius. But a crucial element was now missing. There was no final ascent to the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. There was no sacrifice of white oxen to the king of the pagan gods. The man who believed he fought under the banner of Christ could not, in good conscience, complete the triumph's most sacred pagan rite. This created a powerful dissonance, a ceremony cut off from its spiritual climax. The triumph's body was still there, the pomp, the soldiers, the spoils, but its pagan soul was being excised. What was to be done with a 1,000-year-old ritual that was now theologically unacceptable? The solution was not to destroy the tradition, but to baptize it. The triumph gradually shed its specifically pagan skin and evolved into a new form of ceremony known as the adventus, or ceremonial arrival. The adventus was the formal entry of a Christian emperor into a city, and it retained all the spectacle the Roman people loved. There were still cheering crowds, soldiers in fine armor, and displays of imperial power. But the core purpose had shifted. It was no longer about thanking Jupiter for a specific victory over a foreign foe. Instead, it celebrated the emperor's enduring authority and the harmonious order he brought to the world, an order now sanctioned by the Christian God. The sacrifices were replaced with prayers. The route to the Capitoline Hill was abandoned in favor of a procession to the city's major churches, where the emperor would give thanks to the one true God. The glorious, chaotic, and deeply pagan parade that had once defined Roman victory was thus quietly retired. Its last echoes are not found in the Forum, but in the coronations of medieval kings and the grand entries of Renaissance popes, a ghost of ancient Rome marching on in a new Christian world. The roar of the crowds and the scent of incense faded, but the triumph refused to die. It found a second, eternal life in the art and literature of Rome, its memory carefully curated and preserved long after the last prisoner was led away. The ceremony was too potent a symbol to be left to fleeting memory, so the Romans captured it in stone and silver, in verse and history, ensuring its glory would echo through the centuries. Walk through the Roman Forum today, and you can still witness one of the most powerful of these frozen triumphs. The Arch of Titus, erected to commemorate the emperor's sack of Jerusalem, features a stunning relief sculpture on its inner walls. It shows Roman soldiers carrying the sacred treasures from the Jewish temple, including the magnificent seven-branched menorah, in a precise, stone-carved replica of a triumphal procession. This was not just decoration, it was a permanent public record, a way of saying to every citizen who passed beneath the arch, "Look what we have accomplished, and remember who brought us this glory." Similarly, coins minted from captured metals would often feature the triumphant emperor in his chariot on one side, a tiny, durable piece of propaganda that circulated through every level of society, from the richest senator to the poorest merchant. Every transaction became a subtle reminder of military victory and imperial power. The poets of the Augustan age, masters of capturing the Roman spirit, wove the triumph into the very fabric of their work. Ovid and Propertius did not just describe the events, they captured the human emotion and spectacle. Ovid, in his love poems, might complain that his girlfriend was more interested in watching a triumph than in him, painting a vivid picture of the crowded celebratory streets. Propertius used the imagery of a triumph to describe his own conquests in love, a playful but telling analogy that shows how deeply the concept was embedded in the Roman imagination. For these poets, the triumph was a shared cultural touchstone, a ready-made symbol of ultimate success that every reader would instantly understand, but it was the historians like Livy and Plutarch who provided the grand, sweeping narratives. Livy, writing the monumental history of Rome from its foundation, meticulously recorded the triumphs of the early republic, listing the spoils and the conquered peoples in painstaking detail. For him, these ceremonies were the vital signpost of Rome's rise to greatness, each one marking a key victory that expanded its territory and solidified its power. Plutarch, in his biographies of famous Greeks and Romans, used the triumph as a key indicator of a man's character. He explored the tension between the public glory and the private individual, often highlighting the moment of the whispering slave as a crucial moral lesson. Through their combined efforts, these artists and writers built an immortal monument far more durable than any marble arch. They ensured that even as the Roman Empire itself crumbled, the image of the painted general in his golden chariot would continue to roll on, forever frozen in the act of achieving his greatest glory. The spectacle of the triumph was more than a show, it was a psychological engine that forged the Roman soul. For the average citizen lining the sacred way, this was not a distant political event, but a visceral participation in their own collective identity. As the spoils of nations rolled past and foreign kings shuffled in chains, a powerful belief was cemented in the heart of every onlooker. This was their destiny, their Romanitas. The ceremony screamed that they were not just residents of a city, but members of a people chosen by the gods to bring order to a chaotic world. It transformed abstract ideas of empire and civilization into a tangible, overwhelming experience, fostering a shared sense of superiority and an unshakable faith in Rome's eternal right to rule. This shared psychological high was a potent glue, binding millions of diverse individuals into a single, unified body with a common purpose. But for the conquered peoples dwelling within the city, the spectacle was a masterclass in terror. Imagine being a hostage prince from Gaul or a merchant from Greece, forced to watch the procession. The message was not one of inclusion, but of absolute, non-negotiable domination. Seeing your own culture's sacred objects treated as trophies and your former leaders paraded toward execution, was a brutal, calculated lesson. It taught that resistance was futile and that the only path to survival was meek submission to Roman power. This psychological warfare was intentional, a public ritual designed to crush the spirit of rebellion before it could even form. Yet for the Roman elite, the triumph represented the pinnacle of a lifetime's ambition. It was the ultimate validation, a public confirmation that one had achieved something greater than mere wealth or political office. A successful triumphator entered the realm of legend, his name forever etched into the history of the state. His family's prestige skyrocketed, his clients multiplied, and his influence in the Senate became almost unassailable. This glory, however, was a double-edged sword. The same adoration that cemented a man's status could also inflate his ambition to dangerous levels, tempting him to believe he was as irreplaceable to Rome as the ceremony itself suggested. The triumph did not just display power, it distributed it, creating winners and losers in the relentless psychological game that was life in ancient Rome. The glory of a triumph was never guaranteed, even for the most successful generals. Behind the public spectacle lay a brutal political battleground within the Senate, where the final decision to grant the honor was often a matter of factional intrigue and personal jealousy. This was where the triumph revealed its true nature, not just as a reward, but as a powerful political lever used by the senatorial aristocracy to control its own military heroes. A victory in the field meant nothing if you could not also win the war of words in the Curia. The most revealing cases are often the triumphs that were denied. Take the infamous example of Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Rome. In the year 71 BC, he had finally crushed the massive slave rebellion led by the gladiator Spartacus, a conflict that had terrorized Italy for years and humiliated several Roman armies. By any measure, this was a major military success that saved the Republic from a dire internal threat. Yet when Crassus returned to Rome and petitioned the Senate for a triumph, his request was flatly denied. The official reasoning was both simple and brutally elitist. A victory over an army of slaves, no matter how large or dangerous, was considered beneath the dignity of a full Roman triumph. Celebrating such a win would, in the eyes of the elite, tarnish the ceremony's sacred purpose, which was to commemorate victories over foreign kings and civilized nations, not to glorify the slaughter of rebellious property. The underlying truth, however, was far more political. Crassus was already dangerously rich and influential. Granting him this supreme military honor would have made him nearly untouchable, upsetting the delicate balance of power among the leading senatorial families. His victory was instead deemed worthy only of an ovation, a lesser form of celebration where the general entered the city on foot rather than in a chariot. This was a deliberate and public snub, a way for the Senate to clip the wings of a man who was flying too high. Why would the state deliberately humble one of its saviors? The answer lies in the constant fear of one individual becoming too powerful. The Senate was a collective body, and its members were determined to maintain their collective control. By denying a triumph, they were sending a clear message to every ambitious general. Your military success serves the state, but your personal glory will be permitted only so far as we allow. The story of Crassus is not an isolated one. Throughout the Republic's history, other commanders found their triumphs blocked or downgraded on technicalities, often engineered by political rivals who saw a potential threat in their rising fame. These controversies expose the triumph not as a straightforward reward for valor, but as the ultimate political prize in a never-ending game of power, a game where the most dangerous enemies were often not on the battlefield, but in the Senate House itself. The ghost of the Roman triumph never truly faded from the Western imagination. Centuries after the last laurel wreath was laid at the feet of Jupiter, a new emperor consciously resurrected its pageantry. Napoleon Bonaparte, a man steeped in the classics, staged his own victory parades through Paris with a meticulous eye for Roman precedent. He understood the same psychological power that the Roman Senate had wielded. His processions were not spontaneous celebrations, but carefully orchestrated events designed to display captured enemy standards and artillery, transforming the spoils of war into a public argument for his own imperial legitimacy. He even commissioned a massive arch, the Arc de Triomphe, directly inspired by the arches of Titus and Constantine, to serve as a permanent stone monument to his victories. This was not mere imitation, it was a calculated claim to a specific legacy of power, linking his new French Empire directly to the glory of ancient Rome. This language of power, first codified on the Via Sacra, echoes still in the modern world. Consider the grand military parades in Washington, D.C. after the World Wars, where rows of tanks and waves of soldiers march down Pennsylvania Avenue. Or look to the vast displays in Moscow's Red Square, where intercontinental ballistic missiles roll past the Kremlin walls before a carefully assembled populace. While the religious elements have vanished, the core components remain strikingly familiar. The display of captured enemy technology, the orderly march of troops, the presentation of national leaders before a cheering crowd all serve the same ancient purposes. These modern spectacles are engineered to legitimize state authority, to unite a population behind a shared narrative of strength, and to project an image of invincibility to both domestic and international audiences. They are in essence secular triumphs, using the same visual grammar of power to tell a story of national destiny and military prowess. The chariot has been replaced by an armored vehicle, the painted general by a statesman in a suit, and the whispers of a slave by the drone of television commentary. Yet the fundamental transaction between the ruler and the ruled remains unchanged. The state showcases its might and its victories, and in return, it asks for the loyalty and awe of its citizens. This enduring template reveals a profound truth about political power. Across 2,000 years, the most effective way to cement authority has not been through force alone, but through a story told in the open air, a spectacle of strength that makes every citizen a witness to their own nation's irresistible rise. But how do we move beyond ancient texts and truly grasp the scale of this ceremony? The stones of Rome itself provide the most powerful testimony. Walking through the Roman Forum today, you are treading on the very path of the triumphators, a path archaeology has painstakingly uncovered. The worn, uneven flagstones of the Via Sacra are not just old rocks. They are the original pavement that bore the weight of golden chariots and the marching feet of legions. Stand on them, and you are standing where the crowds roared, where the scent of incense once hung thick in the air. Your gaze is drawn upward to the single remaining corner of the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill. Its massive foundation blocks, still visible today, give us a sense of the monumental scale the triumphant general faced on his final, grueling climb. This was the destination, the spiritual summit of the entire Roman world, and its physical presence confirms the immense effort and profound piety required to complete the sacred journey. Further along the route, the Arch of Titus stands as a frozen moment of triumph. Its inner reliefs are not merely carvings, they are a precise stone-carved documentary. One panel shows Roman soldiers carrying the sacred treasures looted from the temple in Jerusalem, including the magnificent 7-branched menorah. You can almost hear the clatter of the carts and the shouts of the soldiers. This arch was not just a monument, it was a permanent public record, a piece of state propaganda carved in marble for every citizen to see, proving that the glorious descriptions in history books were real. Then there is the Tullianum, the dark, damp prison at the foot of the Capitoline. Its low, circular chamber and the spring that still wells up inside offer a chilling, tangible connection to the ceremony's brutal finale. This is where the captured enemy leaders, after being paraded in their splendor, met their end. To stand in that confined, oppressive space is to understand the non-negotiable stakes of resisting Rome. Beyond these grand structures, smaller artifacts whisper the same story. Coins minted from captured metals often featured the triumphant emperor in his chariot. These small, durable pieces of propaganda circulated through every level of society, from the richest senator to the poorest merchant, making every financial transaction a subtle reminder of military victory. Official inscriptions, carved on stone and set up in public places, meticulously recorded the Senate's official decree granting a triumph, listing the general's name and his conquered foes. These are the legal documents of glory, the paper trail of ambition made permanent in rock. Archaeology does not just confirm the literary accounts, it breathes life into them. It provides the sensory details, the imposing scale, and the chilling physical reality that text alone can only describe. The stones and the stories together allow us to reconstruct not just the event, but the experience, placing us as witnesses to one of history's most spectacular and complex rituals. It was, in the end, a single ceremony with 1,000 faces. The Roman triumph wove together the raw reality of military conquest, the solemn duty of religious ritual, the cunning art of political propaganda, and the dramatic flair of social theater into one overwhelming tapestry of power. For centuries, this single event defined what it meant to be Roman. It was a day when a general could taste divinity, when the gods were thanked with the smoke of sacrifice, when the populace was awed into loyalty, and when foreign enemies were shown the ultimate price of defiance. This was not merely a parade, it was the engine of an empire, a brilliant and brutal performance designed to shape the very identity of a civilization. The true legacy of the triumph is this enduring testament to the Roman genius for ceremony, for understanding that to control the story of a victory is to control the future itself. We would love to hear which part of this incredible spectacle captured your imagination the most. Was it the painted general, the whispering slave, or the chilling fate of the prisoners? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the hidden heart of the ancient world.